Hello, and welcome, and happy International Women's Day, because this is actually being filmed on International Women's Day. So hello to all the women that make our world go round and all of the women who have gone before us. Today on our spotlight of someone doing great things in leadership, we have got an awesome human here with us, Justine Ulph. Now, I've known Justine since she was Justine Smith, quite a few years now. And Justine and I worked together many moons ago at Hunter New England Health and also at HMRI. And our paths have just crossed ways for many years. And I've always admired the great work that Justine does and her work ethic and her approach and the kinds of causes and things that she gets behind and that she's passionate about. Today, Justine is the Manager of Strategic Research Initiatives at the Office of the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation. So say that with marbles in the mouth. That's quite a title.
I tried to get them to drop a word. I mean, honestly, you've got to be able to say it.
It's a university. You've got to come up with some kind of acronym. It's great to have you with us, Justine. Thank you.
Well, thanks, AJ. Yes, I am delighted to kind of come in and sort of share, I suppose, some of my journey. It's one that's always had purpose at the heart. And as AJ mentioned, having worked together in health, I've gravitated to roles where I can have sort of maximum impact. And I find I very quickly get sort of impatient if I feel like I'm in a role where I'm not able to deliver exactly the impact that I want to have. So I've never really been tied to, while I've had longevity in my roles, I've never really been tied to roles if they haven't fulfilled me. And so I'll talk a bit about each of those roles, but then what I've put up on the slide today is a bit of an approach that I take every 12 months to sort of really set my intentions, if you like. And I do this with my girlfriends. It's something that several professional women who I have as sort of an inner circle, we get together after the craziness of Christmas and we basically just get hundreds of magazines on a big table and we start to just hone our direction. And we do it not just in a career with a career focus, but just a whole of life kind of focus. And for each year that we do it, it's just incredible how many of the elements of our vision board, if you like to call it, there's probably lots of names, but how many of those things that we sort of put down on paper actually become a reality. And I think it's that sort of notion of being forward looking. Sometimes our photos that we might, or our visuals that we might put around us are of our past, but I like to put visual representation of my future and what I want to create in that future. And so I find that this exercise really anchors me to, my intentions every 12 months. And it's amazing, things that you may not think you're able to achieve, somehow they come to light when you refer back to these boards. So that's just something that you may like to consider yourselves as a fun exercise to just help you to ground yourself really in who you are and what you really want to achieve. So when I was coming on today, I just quickly popped this up, which also sits on my phone. And I just kind of wrote down these keywords that sort of sprang to mind about who I am, I suppose, as a person and how I like to work. So I work within a really structured environment, but I'm actually not quite a structured individual. I'm someone who's kind of quite creative. So I bring a lot of my own creative kind of skill set, and I think that's just an innate skill set. I bring that to my roles. So my current role at the university is about driving precinct activation across the numerous kind of campuses of the university and our strategic programs. So in this role, I work with the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Z Upton, and we're basically targeting precinct activation. So one of my core roles at the moment is developing a bid to the federal government to look at an innovation park at Callaghan campus. I'm tying in, concepts around how we can integrate precincts regionally. So tapping the Port of Newcastle's Clean Energy Precinct, the John Hunter Hospital Innovation Precinct, and also activity up at Muswellbrook. That precinct there is the Hunter Innovation Precinct. So what we aim to do at the uni in the space that I'm in is that real translation from that applied research to develop new technologies, taking that applied research, working with industry partners to grow new industries. So we work in quite an industrial setting at the uni. There's companies that come to us with problems that they want solving, and we have a very large scale expertise base that can bring new large technologies to light, really. So what I'm doing is focusing on how that can improve sustainability, how that can improve regional productivity. So it has economic bents to it. It has health. When you translate that to, a health setting, it could be health innovation and new technologies for health innovation, and that environmental impact. That work also extends to the Pacific. So I get to kind of engage with Pacific countries on how we can embed our knowledge into the Pacific environment to help with environmental protection at that scale. So, but I'm a one-man band. I'm kind of someone who doesn't manage large teams. I'm working, independently, but across the organisation to pull in the various disciplines, the various backgrounds as required. So I have kind of worked into a role, that's sort of 9 years in the making, with now that trust and that experience that I know how to lean on teams, when it's required. So not everyone's in that fortunate position to have that flexibility, but I've, I suppose, positioned myself really to be in this place. I kind of, it speaks to that not really wanting to be a little bit unhinged, wanting to be able to move quickly, pivot quickly, but knowing what the base is that I can utilize as I go.
So there's so much already in all of that, Jussie. Okay. I don't know if everyone else will be going, all the things. I want to talk to you about all the things.
All the things, yeah.
For starters, I guess I'm really wanting to remind everyone who's either here live or watching later, and I know lots of you will be watching later, and I know there's a few members who have things that will align with what you're talking about really well, that might want to reach out and network with you as well.
Yeah, sure.
But I want everyone to be listening, particularly for the mindset lessons that Jossie's talking about, and also the tactical, practical stuff and how you might apply that in your own leadership journey, your own career. But so listen kind of twofold is what I really like in these calls, that it's, okay, there's mindset stuff going on there, and Justine's already dropped some bombs around how she's created that career for herself and how she's gone about doing that, and even her risk-taking appetite, but also the fact that she's talking about tactical things, about how you have influence across an organization even when you don't have control, because the people aren't your direct reports. So there's lots of gold and juice in here. But I want to take you back first, Justine, if that's all right, to where did you start in your career? Because loads of people I've been talking to are like, oh, I don't really have a plan and I'm just wandering around and hoping for the best. So tell us about, where did you begin?
Okay, so I studied social science and policy at the University of New South Wales, and that was a really broad degree, but it was actually also based in quite a decent level of program development and evaluation. And so I took away from that course the ability to analyze, but the ability also to use that skill set across any kind of sphere, any kind of discipline that interested me. So really that just served me really well in that I need to be passionate about what I'm doing. Therefore, I can take that kind of toolkit with me in any kind of domain. So I often say I've got 3 children. The eldest is 20. You know, this period for them of doing their undergraduate studies is really about equipping them with a sort of general skill set that is so invaluable that they can then translate into whichever sector, whichever area interests them, is how I feel. So the broader, the better is kind of my approach. So for that, because I was interested in health and had been since the AIDS pandemic, I think was really what struck me growing up. That really kind of was, I suppose, that sort of signal of the area that I wanted to pursue. So for me, the public program focus that I took in my early career was into cancer prevention. So I worked on the establishment of the National Breast Cancer Screening Program, and the establishment then soon after of the cervical cancer screening program. So very much a health promotion kind of beginning, but I think one that was about bringing a whole new sort of system into being around this broad population-based screening. So that then had this funny kind of connection back to Newcastle, because a lot of the public health and epidemiology specialists and behavioural researchers that were operating in the Newcastle environment were actually building these new programs for the Cancer Council in Sydney. So I had then decided to travel and did lots of adventurous things abroad, but came back to Newcastle and was really ready to harness, you know, the beauty of working in a city where things are within your reach, basically. So if you think about the difference between Sydney and Newcastle on some of our large programs, you're dealing with one university, you're dealing with a connected business community, you're dealing with one hospital, and it's one region, you know, that's really having to be enterprising, having to be nimble, having to diversify constantly, but having a really strong knowledge and skill base to leverage. And so for me, coming back into the Hunter was about kind of re-establishing with my core principles programs that would elevate health and medical research. So I sort of pivoted from roles in public health into the world that AJ worked in at the time in public relations at the John Hunter, and really honed my communication skills. Prior to that, I'd been more, you know, academic in my approach. So then I got the blend that was how to, you know, really gear information for public audiences. And those are the skills that have continued to be honed as I've then sort of transferred from health and medicine into energy and resources. And some people would kind of go, oh my God, how do you bridge that divide? Like, I failed chemistry at high school, and here I am sort of, might have been 12 years later, like ended up going into a role at Hunter Medical Research Institute as one of 3, so super early days there, and then had children, was coming and going. But I came back to a role that was similar sort of emphasis on development, but rather than a community focus, it was an industry focus. And it was in a really highly technical, specialized area that I knew myself I hadn't really kind of grasped in high school, but I became like a chemical engineering expert because I was passionate about it. So I just imbibed all the academic, and I did this in health as well, just took in all the information at that scientific level because I was passionate about it. It wasn't hard.
Yeah.
And I was never sort of someone, I suppose, that thought, God, I don't have the knowledge, so I'm not going to apply. For me, not having the knowledge is actually the driver, because I have an inbuilt interest in learning, I think. So I like being a novice.
So
yeah,
opposed to some people I was talking to who are members here just this week about applying for jobs, yes or no, they were like, I don't have all the criteria. You're looking going, ooh, that's an interesting area to grow in.
Yeah, I like being a novice.
Yeah.
I like the challenge of having to build that that expertise in that area.
And what I hear in that is you may not have all of the building materials perhaps for a new role. So you don't know all the content or topic, but you've got that scaffolding of your social science, your analytical skills, your communication skills, your ability to network and connect. And so you already got a scaffold. It's then I've just got to learn some new bricks to build the building.
Yeah.
But you're really good at, I believe, from what I've seen, trusting yourself that you have enough of that scaffold skills that will allow you to bridge that gap and to make that leap. That's actually quite uncommon, Justine. I don't know if you realize how uncommon that is from people that I see and meet, where they have competence maybe, but not the confidence.
Yeah, I'm a little bit like the reverse.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So has that never been a challenge for you in your career? Is it something that you've just always had a bit of innate, I believe I can do this or I can learn?
It could be why I've put myself in an academic environment, because they love to teach.
Yeah.
So there is always time to explain. No matter how busy you are, I've ended up with leaders around me that will sit down and go, well, blah, 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 blah. And I'm able to fill in the gaps. Plus, I also ask lots of questions.
Yeah.
I really do ask lots of questions. That's how I learn. And yeah.
Which is also not being afraid to not have answers, isn't it? So what I see in a lot of people making that shift from manager to leader is they make an assumption that I have to know everything and I've got to be smarter than my staff or the people around me. And what you're doing is kind of the reverse, going, I don't need to be the smartest person in the room. I've just got to ask good, smart questions that will draw out from those good people. Yeah.
And then what underpins that as well is that social capital. So I use a lot of social capital with everything I do.
Yeah, tell us.
So I suppose that's the relationship building side. So I disarm people, I listen, I ask questions, I probe, but I'll always go to people for input, involvement. And so I end up with very few people ever saying no. Right. I kind of build this kind of collective around me where I kind of, because it's not, I don't do it on purpose. It's just how I want to work. I want to work with a team. I want to work cooperatively. I want it to be something where I can draw on everyone's ideas. So that's a sort of style, I think, that's run through everything that I've done, whether it's been my own voluntary pursuits. And I'd set up a fundraising arm of HMRI when I came back to Newcastle because I wanted to meet, a new dynamic group of professionals. And I think this kind of speaks to why I suppose I am a bit like I am, is that's how my family roll. So my mother said to me when I was complaining about there not being events that I could afford to attend, she said, well, just create your own. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Why don't I? And that was in the days, that was you and Kirsten Mully kind of started that off, didn't you? I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just that approach. It's like, well, yeah, okay, I probably can just start.
Which, if we look at some people here will have done the LSI, Lifestyles Leadership Index. That's really moving into the blue space where how can I be more affiliative? How can I just create the networks that I need? And who else wants to do this stuff? as opposed to being more in the green where it's approval seeking or dependent, where I need someone else to do that for me. You can hear in Justine's language how blue she is, in that she's just like, go out and seek those people and ask them, hey, do you want to play in the sandpit together?
Yeah. And then doing that in a way, though, that you still can bring people in with structure, because not everyone's like me. Like we set up a book club this year, and it's so funny. It's on my chart on this thing. It's called Reading Between the Wines. And that's that reference, Between the Wines. That's all about book club. And it's women who, I'm just trying to read it, women choosing their own path.
Yeah.
But it's so funny because the book club is a choose your own adventure book club, because I can't, well, I just am like, there's lots of books.
Yeah.
So I can't hone down into one book. So we're a book club where there's about 4 or 5 different choices. And some people who are structured, who are on our messenger because they're part of the book club, are like, I can't cope with the fact that we can't
Everyone's
even
doing something
settle on
different.
one book.
I love it.
Yeah, but to me, I need that flexibility. I need to have lots of options.
Yep.
And, you know, and so it's just been wonderful to see people's reactions to a non-structured approach. And I think that I recognize that book club's book club, but in settings where I'm trying to take people on a particular journey, I do also work in a structured way to give them the support that they need to feel like they can contribute. You know, people want to optimize their contribution. They need to know it's not just about what's up in my head. Yeah.
And how do I come and play in the sand? And I love that in the middle of your slide, it's got the fast forward to the end, and you realize that the middle was worth slowing down for. I love that. So I'm going to pause this for a moment and just say, in the chat box, or even, I know Michelle, you're here, feel free to unmute if you want to. What's landing or resonating with you right now? What are you hearing that you're like, oh, yeah?
So much. So much. The fact that you chose a path with passion, that I really love. What stood out was the broadness of that in the beginning, and how the essence of that has just continued to follow, like the journey to continue to have it unfold. The one thing that is really standing out is because you went broad and then you've ended up honing in on one uni, one hospital, one region. And I absolutely love the macro, micro of that, but the potential that that brings and yields in just that thought process. Yeah, in the fact that there's such a big country, but if we could just focus on this immediate area, and so many needs can be met because of proximity, and also that narrow focus, that really stood out for me as well. But I love, more than anything, just your approach in terms of the academia meeting the other soft skills that have become your superpowers of communication. I love how you've got the structure and how you articulate. So I can see how when you disarm, ask the questions, probe, ask for input and involvement, that is actually how you get that collective around you, because you really engage. How people just wouldn't be able to say no to you. I can see that.
100%.
I see the blue just oozing out of you, and that's just really like sexy to me right now as well. Like, I go, wow, that's just beautiful. The humanistic, encouraging, the affiliative, like all of it is just, you're personifying all of that, and it's great.
Absolutely. And the achievement, right? You can hear self-actualizing, you know, that Justine's really grown into herself and gotten comfortable with that. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it's just lovely. I love hearing your story.
Yeah.
And I think what then I've done is put around me the people that I know become the complement, because I am just not great with process. And so I put people around me that are.
Yes.
And I think that speaks to the unapologetic aspect, is that we have to bring our whole selves I've
Yeah.
always brought my whole self. I
Authentically.
can talk as comfortably to, like I did yesterday, the CEO of Siemens in the morning, Siemens Energy. And then in the afternoon, I was sitting around the Indigenous Research and Education Committee at the university. So it was just like, you know, two ends of our whole selves, with me in the middle, engaging across both. And I just am really conscious about and celebrate the skills of others that just come in that are completely different to my own. The worst thing I could imagine would be, you know, having teams where you're all the same, like having that blend.
Yeah.
And what everybody brings. I just love it. I absolutely love bringing teams together. But isn't it funny? Because I don't manage that many people. Like the most people I've ever managed is 4, because I need a bit of freedom as well. So I'm a bit of a, I am quite self-sufficient. Like I will do a lot of my own project building. I love it when I get the opportunity to drive teams, but I'm not on a career ladder.
Yes.
I'm on my own ladder. I'm doing my own thing.
Wow.
So the career ladder aspect has meant that it's not like I'm aspiring to be the next label with however many people under me. That is just, and same for title. Like my only thing when I was coming into this new role, not that you can change anything in a university system when it comes to these things, but I'm like, I just have to be able to say it. Like, I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
So it's got one too many words, but aside from that, I'll work out a way.
And that's really powerful, I think, in really thinking about that career ladder, and that there's not just one way to have a fulfilling life and career. There's not one path where, oh, I have to aim for general manager, even though I suck at that stuff and it's not my strengths and I don't enjoy it, but it's the only way to get ahead. Like there's so many other ways to fill up our cup and to aspire to having a career that really has a value add for you and for the people that you work with. So let's change gear a little bit and fast forward. Oh, Michelle, did you have something to ask? Yeah.
Oh, I think it's gone now. It was one of those moment questions. It was, I love how the analogy of the ladder and the scaffold, like I literally, that wasn't what was coming out when I put my hand up. It was literally a connection between those that was a little bit more impactful in terms of what I was going to say. But
yeah, and on that, I call it a career lattice. Like I like to think of a lattice, and it's like, ooh, that sideways move or even down is better over there, because that's going to give me some skills or something that I'm really interested in, as opposed to I'm looking at the butt of the person above me. And I've always done that and looked and thought, do I want their life? No.
I know. I know. And you know what the thing is for me is that if I got into a role where I was managing people and not delivering, I would struggle. So for me, it's always about that mix between how much time I get to spend sort of on the ground doing the face-to-face, because if ever that was to shift and I was managing those to go out and do that, I would lose a lot of my motivation, because it's not really what I'm about.
Yeah.
My job, I feel, is still to be the coach for my kids. So I'm translating everything to them to grow them as my little team.
Yeah.
And yeah, in the work setting, I'm just leveraging across, up, down.
Yeah, and calling on the strengths of others, because that's where they sit best. So I've got a dog going, my team's going crazy balls in here.
I've got a cockatoo. Can you hear it?
Movies, no.
The cockie's going mental out there. They're so bossy, cockies. They're so funny.
We're definitely in Australia. So let's switch gears and fast forward to where you're at now. And what are, say, 2 or 3 things that have really made the biggest difference that really have allowed you to step into what you're doing now?
Trust in myself, that I have everything that I need and I am enough. This is the biggest problem, I think. And I wouldn't say this is the journey that is all the skills I've evolved, because I never put myself in a place where I have all the skills. I'm always learning, but that my age, and if people have this wisdom earlier, then golly, you know, watch out, because to get to 51 and just to be, you know, coaching myself, or not having coached myself previously, but now sitting in that space, which is, I'm enough. Everyone around me sees it. You know, they worked it out years ago. It's just whatever I needed to sit in, you know, wholly and feel myself. And I'm feeling that. So that means that if I do need a break, if I do need a rest, if I need 5 minutes to put my feet up because I've been slogging on the last tender, so be it. Like, the value's there.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's not that clock on, clock off, or did I show up, which is so not green, right? You can really hear in the LSI, it's not that I need to clock on and off and deliver a certain thing every day. And we as women have cycles, we have rhythms, we have patterns. And so honoring that, and I love in her own agenda thing, the unapologetic, you know, the authenticity, that we want leaders who go, do you know what? I do need a day off. Or do you know what? I'm going to pull all-nighters because this thing's worth it and I can do that. Like
that will be intrinsic motivation that will bring that in. Yes. It won't be that you're feeling like, well, if it is that you're feeling like, if I don't do this, this person's going to go off their head, you're in the wrong place. Like, literally, you need that trust, you need that scope to deliver how you need to deliver. And I think that our society is getting to that point, you know, thankfully post-COVID and working from home, that we are, I think, investing back in people for who they are as whole people versus needing to see them sitting at a desk and, you know, not lifting their head for 7 hours. Yeah. And
moving from that dichotomy of parent-child, you know, that the boss is the parent, the staff are children, to we're all adults. You go and adult, do your stuff. So long as you're delivering what we need you to, be an adult and discern that yourself. And I think even, you know, legislation and everything is moving that way, you know, workplace safety legislation around well-being and around, you know, psychosocial healthy environments. We're really starting to move that way. I still think in some ways when it's regulated, it starts becoming sometimes tick and flick. Yeah. But I do also see some really genuine moves towards making this incorporated in a much more organic way in lots of organizations, which is awesome, isn't it?
So in this role at the moment, I'm just setting myself targets that I really want to deliver that are just so aspirational, but really just, if there's one thing I can do in this current phase, it's going to be to deliver X. So I've really just set myself my own, you know, target. And one example, because there's a few, but one is when I left. So what happened was I went from, I moved away from HMRI when I started having kids, and I was working from home on projects, and that was really flexible. And then I sort of wanted to stay home a bit longer, so I started this business that was completely different in urban gardening. And then when it was time to sort of settle, and the reason I wanted to do that was, again, I wanted flexibility with my kids. And then when I knew it was time to sort of lock back into a full-time gig again, I went to the HMRI equivalent at the uni with my own sort of sense of what it was, which just far exceeded my expectations of what they were doing and the scale that they were working. So it was completely just a massive eye-opener for me around what really is at the heart of a lot of our innovation in the region. And at that time, I came across a colleague in the Indigenous strategy area that built this business case for Indigenous ecological knowledge and how we could establish a living lab around, you know, mechanisms to educate, integrate sort of land management rehabilitation practices. And at the time I was working with a lot of mining companies and a lot of the resources sector around, you know, how we're going to transition from a coal-based economy to a new energy economy, and what we would do with all the open cut mines and exploring all that sort of side of our future. And I was just so grounded, and I've always had an interest in Indigenous issues, social issues more broadly, but particularly Indigenous. And anyway, I went off and had 12 months work experience at the port, activating their clean energy precinct. And then when I was attracted back, because the uni, and I've never been in the bureaucracy of the uni. I've been like, you know, always in my own little Sherwood forest with other people that like being a little bit removed from the bureaucracy. And I came back, and this business case that had been built was still sort of sitting on a shelf. And I said to Nathan Towney, who's the head of the Indigenous strategy, I said, if there's one thing that I want to do in coming back to the uni, it's to deliver that program.
Wow.
And so, you know, I'm working every channel to embed aspects of Indigenous ecological knowledge, development, training, education into everything that I do. And I'm making it my mission that I get that program of work funded, so that we can, you know, just expand our Western institutions
Living
into
our
something
way.
much more flexible. Yeah.
100%. And you'll see other countries like New Zealand do that really well. The NUCA healthcare process, Alaskan process do that amazingly, where it's embedded in everything and it's not a tokenistic, you know, add-on at the end.
Exactly.
And I can see on your chart that you've got LORE there. So that real embedding that in there is so valuable. And what I love about it is from the Blue Styles achievement thinking. Can you hear how Justine is like, I'm setting myself these big targets, you know?
Yeah, they're my challenges. They're no one else's.
Yes. Yeah. And how refreshing that is. And also how much satisfaction and fulfillment you must get out of your roles, because it's not just you've been dictated these 5 KPIs. It's I'm striving for something that I believe in. Yeah. So I'm curious, as we kind of come around to wrapping up, you were talking about how you're kind of coach your kids now, and also that you have this ability to have influence without having control. What would you do to coach your earlier self? Is there anything that you would coach young Justine starting out in her career now, knowing what you know?
Yeah, I had to overcome a fear of failure. I think that was my biggest thing, was I had to, and I really credit the boss that I had at the Newcastle Institute for Energy and Resources, Alan Broadfoot, for his approach to me. And he's an excellent coach. He's an absolute dynamo in terms of how he utilizes a team. But what he used to say to me constantly was, you know, if we don't get it this time, we'll get it next time. Everything has its time and place. Yeah. So he knew that as long as we were working hard to the goals, and we always achieved beyond what we set every year. We always had KPI sessions and we set the goals as a group. But he was also quite pragmatic in what could be achieved in the current landscape at the current time. And so that gave you permission, where you knew, I've put everything into this, but I just can't get the result. It's like, well, maybe it's just not now. Yeah, so it was sort of permission to know that you've put the effort in and to trust that you did everything you could. And if you didn't get the outcome, it wasn't always about what you did or didn't do.
Yeah, and that just maybe things didn't quite align up in whatever reason.
And that consistency is therefore the key, that you have a big strategy, a big vision, but it's one brick at a time. And if you keep working, you will be successful.
Yes.
You're not going to not be successful
Yes.
if you just keep stepping through, you know.
What I love about that, coming back to the Indigenous as well, you know, and even thinking of the amazing book Sand Talk by Tyson Yackaporta.
Yes.
That, you know, that things have their own timing and we can't force stuff sometimes. And also you're such an innovator in your field and kind of a little bit ahead of everyone else and a little bit off the wall, that sometimes you probably got to wait for everyone else to catch up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'm often the first mover. When you're the first mover, yeah, it's not always going to land.
yes.
It could just be that you
2-3 years.
recognize you're the first mover. You don't have to always be it.
Yes.
But I've always, you know, sometimes I've been it and it's worked, and other times I've been it and it hasn't quite worked. And the Victory Gardens model, where I set up the urban gardening business, was a little bit the same, because I set it up as a business and it probably only ever needed to be a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
So the business model was maybe not quite suited to what I was trying to achieve. Anyway, it was great.
Yeah.
I have no qualms of failing at that.
I ran a workshop yesterday, would you believe, in Newcastle. I was back there, first time in ages, in Noah's, and I looked out and saw a rooftop garden that was really cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wonder if that's a Victory garden. Like,
yeah, well, the New South Wales Pathology, it was one of our first gardens we did on the top of a building in the old David Madison building. So maybe it was that one.
yeah, but I could see a garden. I was like, ooh, maybe that was.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah.
So much. So I heard Michelle laughing. Something landed then for you, did it? Or you're just
being the first mover. I so relate to that. I feel like it takes sometimes 1, 2, 3 years until the ship has turned. Till then I've got people on the deck, and yet I've seen it so clearly the whole time. And then it becomes a matter of all those other elements that you said, like how well can I continue to communicate the key elements in order to, I guess, I'd be identifying what people around me would feel is the problem, that I'm constantly trying to shine the spotlight on the solution to be able to get them standing on the deck as soon as possible. So yeah, I really resonated with that. But I also loved how the being pragmatic with the landscape and the timing. I think that is so key and so critical, because you actually had a real life example of it by sharing that there was an on the shelf previous piece of work that had been done. So to me, the passionista always will find their opportunity for the landscape and the timing, because you were able to take a piece of work that had already had that energy laying dormant, but then the timing came and the passion within you just knew that's the time to go and do this. And I just love that. I love how that all marries up when you're prepared to carry the passion with everything that you are standing for, because there's usually something already there that you can go and plug into and make a huge impact with. And and
then it's having the people around you that can support you on that journey. So do not tolerate the toxic sort of bosses that are just trying to push you down. That's not the right environment for you. Leave them be, you know, live your life, I'll live mine, but don't feel like you've got to convince them, work around them to kind of somehow shape yourself to fit in. Like, just make the exit. AJ coached me through an exit, and I think it was lightning fast, AJ. It was like, I'm getting out of here.
You're a fast action taker. Once you had a bit of realization, you were like, okay, that's clear. I'm out.
Cut the cord.
What are my options? Yes. Yeah. So Justine, go.
I suppose the only other thing that I think about as a young person, because I have had such a fulfilling life that I don't feel like there's anything I haven't wanted to achieve. But one of the things that I did when I was young was I wanted to experience the enormity of the planet. So I put myself out in extreme environments But I also did it for my 50th. I went and walked the Larapinta because I find it so humbling, and I almost feel like I need to connect in that way to know really what my purpose is. So for me, it's like we're part of something huge, and you will gain greater purpose when you are connected to that, because you realize how small you are.
It's so
Yet how much impact you can have.
Yeah,
even
it reminds
like
me of
one
a
tiny
couple of little
person.
things. One is a song called Holocene by Bon Iver, or Bon Iver, however you say it, who were known for Skinny Love, but they had this song Holocene, and it is about you are infinitely small and yet you're part of something enormous. And the film clip of it is this little boy in a hut in this like an Alaskan landscape or something, and he's just surrounded by rocks and mountains, and he's this tiny, it just really makes you realize. But also coming back to Indigenous communities, I know when I sit with elders and their perspective is always, how will this impact the next 7 generations, and what might this one small thing we do here impact through the songlines the other side of the country. That perspective in everything, rather than I'm just worried about my little piece right here, right now, is a really valuable tool to be able to do that zoom out, I think. Amazing. So to wrap up, I have one last question, if I might, and that's just, at this point in your career and life, what are you most grateful for?
In my career
or life?
And life, freedom. The freedom to be working, flexibly on the things that matter to me. But I know I've created it. Like, I've created that for myself. It's not something that it's been handed to me, and it has been something that I've been determined and hardworking. And but I think at the essence is still that sense where, even though I might work in a large institution, I have freedom to put my stamp on the things that matter. And that's the only place you'll ever find me, really.
And we all want to hang out there, so don't worry about that. You might have people rushing and meditating. And I think we are very fortunate to live in a nation that allows for that as well. Very fortunate to live in these times and in the world. And I think during COVID, we saw an element of what that might look like when some of our freedoms are removed. So they're very hard fought for, aren't they, in lots of places? So thank you so much. This has been so rich, including the picture. We love that you share, your deepness of your actual vision board with us. I really want to encourage everyone watching this later, and you might want to even come back to it because there's some really good little reminders in there. And I think, Justine, you're incredibly magnetic and contagious. So I can't help grinning the whole time, just listening to you. It's lovely. But I really want everyone to kind of think about what's their key takeaways, and also what's 2 actions that you might take. What's something you might shift just slightly in your own leadership, particularly, I think, around that self-belief and just witnessing yourself. When am I allowing other people to contain or control me? When am I actually going for what I want? And I love that you've had big visions, that you set yourself big targets. And what might that look like in your own life and career for everyone who's watching later? Take some time out to actually do a bit of that dreaming and to go, what do I want to set for myself? I was working with Dr. Darren Morton this week, who runs the Lift Project. And he said he felt a little bit stagnant, and he said, I need to challenge myself with a goal. And he was afraid of heights. And so he said, I'm going to learn hang gliding. And his goal from the beginning was to hang glide from like Mount Sugarloaf to the ocean. And he has done it. So it took him quite a few years to get the skill up, and he got a buddy, and they did that together. And he said to fly at 4,000 feet at, above everything, and then to get to the ocean and be
incredible.
He said the most incredible feeling. So I love that, set a goal for yourself that just means something to you. So thank you on International Women's Day for the generosity of your time, We love what you're up to in the world and can't wait to see all of the great things that come out of what you're doing in the precinct with the university. And I have all sorts of ideas of people I now need to connect you with as well.
Yeah, and I think my takeaway for everyone is sort of just to start, whatever it is, and then don't be afraid to bring people in. And that could just be, do you want to have coffee? Hey, I'm bouncing around this idea, because I find people to be very generous at their heart, and so you should never feel like it's something that might seem too grandiose, because the moment you start it and start chipping away by, I don't know, talking about it, it will start to unravel in and of itself.
Yeah. And the
whatever it is
initiative that we're working on is exactly that. And Michelle here has been an early adopter and the first company to go, we're going to be part of that and back that, which is all about creating the most thriving organizations that Australia has ever seen in order to help transform the lives of Australians. So, yeah, we've got a big goal and a big mission, and we are inspired by yours, Justine. So thank you.
Thanks.
Amazing.
Enjoy the rest of your day and a bit of your slower pace today, recalibration after your big week. And for everyone else, I look forward to seeing you next month. Our guest speaker next month is a lovely guy with a very radio voice, Phil Layla. And Phil has worked in all sorts of government agencies in lots of different positions in emergency and disaster, and he's now actually a workplace inspector. So we're going to hear a bit about how he's moved and changed in his career as well. So thank you, Justine. Have a beautiful
pleasure.
day.
See ya.
Thanks.